So I need to, set me up with the distance. So thank you for this kind invitation. It's always a great pleasure and honor to be here. And I will start with something that you all know, that is the fact that drug-resistant TB is a threat for TB control. So what do we have here? We have that every year we have almost 500,000 of estimated drug-resistant TB new cases, and of those, only a small fraction of new cases and more of them from the retreatment cases are diagnosed and start on treatment. And this is really a huge problem. And consider that we need to change the paradigm of MDR-TB transmission, because when I was a student, MDR-TB was the paradigm of a iatrogenic disease, so a disease that was generated basically by the mismanagement of the patients. So wrong therapy, poor drugs, lack of compliance, poor capacity by the physician, and the system in general was generating MDR-TB, and the approach was really to prevent the generation. Now we are facing the transmission in the community as well as in the nosocomial facility of the MDR-TB. So our approach really needs to change. So what are the actions to control the MDR-TB epidemics? Pretty obvious. The universal screening for drug-resistant tuberculosis, to use the drugs according to the drug-resistant pattern, to use only effective drugs in shorter regimens. Is this feasible? Well, not very much. My next point will be to discuss with you the barriers to implement the universal screening for drug resistance. Screening for bacterial drug resistance is what we do in the laboratory every day for the other diseases. It's just not working as well for tuberculosis. Why is not working? Because compared to previous years or decades, what we know now is that we do not know. And what we do not know are the basis to develop proper assay for tuberculosis, for M tuberculosis. We are missing the critical concentration as a clear breakpoint. And the reason why we do not know the critical concentration for many of the drugs, and I mean existing drugs and maybe new drugs, is because we do not know the distribution. So what we are missing are clear data on the ECOF of M tuberculosis population for the majority of the drug. We also know now that M tuberculosis is not a single clone, but is more of an heterogeneous family. So what can work, or in some cases, critical concentration for some clone may not be appropriate for other. So we have a lineage-related variability. The WHO in particular is putting a lot of effort to come up with critical concentration to standardize the testing of M tuberculosis. But as you can see from the comparison of these two tables, one coming from the previous 2008 concentration, proposed critical concentration, and the new one updated in 2012, what you can see is that for many drugs in 2008, we didn't have critical concentration. Those were evaluated and updated in 2012. But are those critical concentration updated in 2012 what we really would like to use in our current practice? I'm not sure, Because if we look at the performance, I mean, one of the main differences that we had to drop the backtech for 60. So dropping the backtech was a great standard somehow. Dropping the backtech, we have lost a very useful tool, but it's basically unfeasible anymore for the radioactivity problem. But even for drugs such as pyrazinamide, what we know is that the test is very often not correct. We also are not sure about the concentration of capromycin in different media. And we do not know what is the critical highest concentration for moxifloxacin. What we know is that when we compare performance of different media, not even genotypic versus phenotypic, we compare the performance of different media, we get a discrepant result. So definitely we are not there yet. In addition to this challenge that are more like knowledge challenge, we have a large challenges in the implementation of phenotypic method. Phenotypic method requires culture, appropriate infrastructure, technical capacity, and requires the centralization of samples, samples that should be grown on culture, so should be still alive. And if we look at the average time to DST, and we are proposing any of those methods really to drive the therapy based on the result of DST, I'm not sure that we can really implement that on a large scale, because results are really coming too late to really lead a therapy that is based on result of DST. In addition, we have this not particularly nice finding. In many settings where results are needed, we can have up to 30% of contamination in liquid culture. That means that one culture out of 3 doesn't give us a result. And also on solid culture, the results are not much better, although they are much longer. I was back from Nigeria. Nigeria is a great country, is also a large country. It has the largest TB burden, the 4th largest TB burden in the world. The problem is that the only 15% case detection is leading to a continuous transmission. If we look at the MDR-TB cases detected, annually, those are estimated to be 4% of the total MDR-TB burden in the country. The capacity in terms of laboratory has been implemented since the Global Fund Round 5, where the equipment, the infrastructure was set up to have at least 8 fully working laboratories. Despite the capacity, the training, very good and knowledgeable people in the laboratory, basically there is no one BSL-3 running, although they have beautiful containers, they have beautiful midget machines, but is the infrastructure, is the lack of the power, is the lack of the ventilation, proper ventilation, that is preventing for using this infrastructure. So although we have theoretical capacity for DST, very few cases receive a DST at the end of the day. So with this phenotypic method, we don't go very far. We need to change to genotypic method. And the genotypic method can really be inspirational, transformational. This is a little bit too much, but I just wanted to tell you that if you have a molecular test that really works, that will really provide you on the spot the sensitivity pattern that can be used at the beginning of the treatment, can be used to use properly the new drugs. You have 2 possibilities. Either you design a regimen that works for all, XDR, more than XDR, or But how long is going to last? Probably not very long. So sooner or later, you will need to test the people. And also, will reduce the inequality due to poor accessibility to DST? Yes, the Gene Xpert is reducing the inequality, in fact. The same Gene Xpert is used in Milano, is used in DC, is used in Nigeria, in a decentralized laboratory, same quality of result, same time, same turnaround time. This is reducing the inequality due to poor accessibility to DST. Will reduce the cost of the side effect, increase the accessibility, and so on. And this transformational, and this slide is tell you that when something works, it's really taken, and it moves fast. And this was probably the best example of a diagnostic that was transformational in the field. If we go back to Nigeria, we have 211 expert machines that are fully functional. And the 400 cases that were diagnosed of MDR, they were all diagnosed by the expert, certainly not by phenotypic DST. And that brought the good news that the Nigeria government issued a directive calling the use of expert for everybody, not only for retreatment, and that will really improve their MDR detection. Why is the expert so good? The expert is so good because it's easy to use, is not complicated, is small, it doesn't require a lot of capacity, but also because it's testing for rifampicin resistance. And rifampicin resistance is something that is particularly lucky in a bacterium that is particularly difficult, because the majority of resistance is in a pretty small hot spot, and the test is picking that up. In fact, you can see from those slides from Paolo that the results looks good even on the theoretical calculation. And if we look at other tests for rifampicin resistance, they all look pretty good. So is the test plus the target and the drug. Do we have limitation? Yes, we do. Because we have commercially available tests for few drugs with variable diagnostic accuracy. Not because we don't have the technology, because we do not have the knowledge. Most of them are targeting the most relevant genes. Not all, because we don't have the complete picture yet, and often they target only the hot spot. We do have difficulties in the interpretation of results. And this is our lack of knowledge. And then we have years of not having trained clinicians in the proper use and interpretation of molecular tests. But that is something that can be fixed. Do they have limit? This is the example of a limit. If there is a clone that comes out and is not mutated in the region that is picked up by the test, then it's an escape. You won't be able to diagnose that. And we need to be aware of that, and we need to know our epidemic. Why the other molecular tests that are endorsed by the WHO are not so transformational? Because for rifampicin, they are a little bit more complicated, but if you are able to do, they are transformational as well. But for isoniazid, they are not so transformational, because we really do not know very much how to interpret in the clinical practice the mutation to INHA, and we do not cover all the strains with these two determinants. The other point is the lucky part of the story is that the majority of MDR are actually mutated here, so the tests perform better in the MDR setting than for isoniazid isolated resistance. These tests, that is, those are results from the first evaluation of the new second-line LPA. Why? They are a big help, but at this time, they won't be transformational because we cannot interpret the pattern of mutation to moxifloxacin compared to the other fluoroquinolones. And the same is here for the second-line injectable. We have a picture that is not completed. If the picture is not completed, then you need something else. And the assay cannot be as transformational as we want. Full genome sequencing, this is fantastic. So we cannot claim that we don't have the overall picture. There, we know everything. We need to extrapolate the data, but this technology has been used in Europe and everywhere to provide clinical results. But even in the best scenario, our current knowledge of mutation cannot provide us the whole picture. And the reason is because we do not have phenotypic data and enough and global knowledge. So why then do we need a centralized database? Is this a very new idea? No, it's not. The TB dream has been there forever. Other databases have been there forever. And I'm sure that most of you think that you have your own database that is full, and you can use that because probably you don't need a more comprehensive one. Probably you are wrong, because you, as well as me, as other friends in this room, don't have the global picture. We only have our collection that comes from our trial, from our patients, and although big, doesn't really represent the whole picture that we have outside. So we have learned a lesson. The lesson is that phenotypic methods are too slow and too demanding. We need to move to genotypic. In order to move to genotypic, we needed to evaluate the performance of our genotypic test on the strains that are circulating in geographic area. And this is not only true for drug resistance. I mean, papers are coming out that even the detection of TB done with the immunochromatographic assay is not working for some M. africanum strain. So they are just not picked up, giving a lot of false negative tuberculosis cases that are misinterpreted as NTM. So what are the barriers? The lack of incomplete knowledge associating SNPs to mechanism of drug resistance and MIC. If we made a mistake in the past, that was not having MICs on our strains. And now this is too expensive, and we don't even know how to face this problem. We don't have the money to face this problem. We have resistant markers in multiple genes, and the full generation, next generation sequencing will help us on that. Unclear link between mutations and clinical outcomes. Complex because in a multi-therapy, the outcomes are not as easy as for other diseases. Presence of mutation not associated to drug resistance. Poor and inconsistent DST and MIC data have been jeopardizing our interpretation of molecular data for the past. We have already listed all this, but I would like to point out that the rare mutations are underrepresented in our database. So only putting the data together, we will reach the number that is needed to evaluate the role of the rare mutations. We needed the two characteristics that the other database don't have, and we are aiming at are the standardization and to be global. Standardization means that the database will be under a standard format, and data that will be entering in the database will be somehow evaluated and curated. Global means that we will try to get all what is available. And because nobody would like to reinvent the wheels, and there are a lot of data that are already out there, the first step is really to contribute to the database in a very transparent and collaborative way. And that will really point to this cartoon that makes you clear that we want to be global, we want to be many, and we want to fill a gap that we currently have in the interest of our patients. Because we have no guarantee that the data that are out there will be given to the database, I was allowed to put the last two slides from Derek Cook. So there are two current initiatives that seems to be very important to support this global effort. One is supported by the Gates Foundation. It's called Cryptic 1. We could have more imagination, but they are called Cryptic 1 and Cryptic 2. And the second one was just made public last week to Derek Cook, and is the award of the Wellcome Trust to really sequence a large number of strains, but we are talking in the order of several thousand, 20, 40, 50,000 from all over the world, and combine the data with solid phenotypic data. Included in this action, there is the possibility to validate a new set of Thermo Fisher plates that will include new drugs such as bedaquiline and the lamanid. If this will be proven as a solid way to produce, if not an at least a central MIC, then we will have genotypic data and phenotypic data that will be contributed to this platform, so we won't be risking the fact that we are not going to miss the statistical number that is needed. And in conclusion, I hope I have convinced you that phenotypic DST is a pain in the neck, and we don't know how to do it. Genotypic DST is the way to go for the future, but today, even with all the magnificent technology that could be available, we are not going to sort out if somebody is resistant to moxifloxacin, high-level resistance or not. And this is a real problem. So this kind of action can give us the solution for the future. And thank you very much.